Hey y'all, good afternoon and welcome back to another Reddit weekly charting and technical analysis video. My name is Chris, also known as Ghost of GBT on Reddit. We're going to be looking at the top 10 upvoted symbols from the thread this week, starting with FSLR. By the way, I did get a new microphone, so hopefully it sounds good. Let me know if you have any problems with the audio or if you have any feedback or anything like that. I'm still kind of messing with the settings and stuff. So starting with FSLR here, first idea was FSLR long, and I do not like this really as a long. Overall, I like it as a long, but right now, at this exact moment, I think it's too extended. It's up now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days in a row, and you can see with these wicks on the top, it's actually starting to get a little bit exhausted, and it's starting to kind of go sideways here. So what I would be waiting for on this one is to see, I kind of ran right into this resistance, so you can't really buy it here, right? Unless it starts to move sideways and starts to hold up in this area. But you can't buy it right now, right? So what I'd be waiting for is maybe like on a 60-minute chart. I would want to see if it can hold this 38 area. If it starts to go sideways above, say, 38, 38.50, 39, somewhere up here, like you just want to see it put in another support level, because right now it's just been grinding upwards for the last 7 or 8 days. And so anybody who bought it down here still needs to take profits. And so those profit takers will potentially drive the price back down. So right now, I do not like this as a long, but it does have, some big breakout potential if it can get over 40 bucks and potentially start to fill in this gap, up to the low 42s or mid 41s. And then, who knows after that. But, for right now, it's a little bit too extended. So not a huge fan at this exact moment, but it's something that I would keep on watch maybe for the next few days and see if it could pull back a little bit, and then you can just buy the dip. So that said, let's move on to number 2, which was Deutsche Bank. So this one is going to be a little tricky. The idea was Deutsche Bank long, and the only issue that I really have with this is just that there's so much news circulating about it right now, and we can see just over the last 2 days, on the 29th at 12:25 p.m., we got bad news and the stock tanks midday. And then 11 o'clock midday on the 30th, we get good news and the stock takes off like a rocket. So it's tough to really say that, unless you're sitting here watching it all day. If you're a full-time trader, then fine. Or if you can watch the stock all day, then that's totally fine. But right now, it's pretty risky, to be trading this, especially if you're swing trading it, to hold it overnight. There's so much news coming out on this thing. Look at FinViz on this ticker. The news flow only goes back 3 days, because literally like every 5 minutes all day long, there's another news article coming out. Somebody's talking about Deutsche Bank. And so any one of these press releases can cause problems with your trade. So unless you are sitting here watching the stock all day, I don't think this is a good trade for most people. Technically speaking, the chart looks fine. Fundamentally speaking, we had this news over here that basically they were going to have to pay a $14 billion settlement to the Department of Justice for some mortgage-backed securities lawsuit that they've got. And so then, of course, people are starting to question whether the bank is going to go insolvent, whether they can afford to pay a $14 million settlement. And then Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, comes out and says Germany has no intention of bailing the bank out, so there's no, chance really for a bailout. They will let it fail. It's not too big to fail, as, some of the ones in the United States were labeled. And then, the next day we get news that says, okay, maybe the Department of Justice settlement will only be $5.5 billion instead of $14 billion. And so now the stock takes off. So, it's fundamentally, it's just kind of all over the place. Technically, it looks good. It's got a lot of volume. It's got, had a strong candle on Friday. But unless you can sit there and watch it all day, it's going to be really tough to trade this, because, you buy it at 4 p.m. and at 4:05 p.m., some news comes out and the thing tanks, or vice versa, right? You short it. There was another guy on here that was asking for Deutsche Bank short, and the same thing can happen in the opposite direction, right? If you shorted it over here thinking, oh man, they're screwed, then, the next day news comes out and completely reverses your trade. If you're not sitting here watching this, you're going to come home from work and find that you're down, 500 or $1,000. So it's, it's a little tricky to trade this. So that would be my advice. Technically speaking, looks like a good chart. It's got a lot of volume. The pattern is not terrible. It's got some momentum, but the news flow is what makes it difficult. So on to the next here, CTSH. What happened with this? Cognizant Technologies. Let's see what happened with this. September 30th. What was the reason for this drop? Investigating Indian payments. What is this company? Business and software services. Disclosure of internal foreign payments probe. Okay. Investigating whether certain payments it made to facilities in India violated the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It says it notified the U.S. DOJ and SEC of its investigation. Interestingly, the company said Friday that President Gordon Coburn resigned from the company on September 27th, and the chief executive of IT services was named president. So I think this is going to have to be a totally technical trade. It does not sound like, a good fundamental trade, at least at this point, unless you know more about the internals of Cognizant Technology than I do. But from a technical perspective, it did have quite a bounce on Friday, so it could potentially, keep going off of that. Great volume, great momentum, really nice range. So yeah, technically speaking, it looks actually really good. You would just, I would treat it as a day trade personally, not as a swing trade, because it did already have a pretty big bounce. So we had this whole move, which doesn't really look like much, right? But it was $4 or $5 a share. So, if there's day traders in this thing, which there are, and short-term swing traders, you buy 1,000 shares of this thing at $45.50, and, it runs $4 or $5. You're up $4,000 or $5,000 in the matter of a few hours. Most people are going to take profits on stuff like that. So, that's why you see this sort of fade into the close as people start taking profits. So yeah, I would just treat it as a day trade. I think technically speaking, it's got great volume. It looks pretty good. You just have to trade it on like an intraday time frame. So look at like a 5-minute chart and trade it, just throughout the day. I personally wouldn't really hold it overnight. Next up, ADMP. I really liked this chart actually, and I was long ADMP back at $3 back here. So I was long off of this breakout, and it sort of worked. Shot up to 350 or so, but it was not clean. It wasn't really a clean move, and so now it looks like it's attempting, to go after that high again. So I do really like this chart. I think if it gets over that spot, it's going to be a very big breakout. Your next resistance is probably going to be 385, and above that 393, and then 4 as the round number, and then 417. So I just look back at these highs, to see where the potential stalling points would be. But I do think if this thing breaks over 350, it could easily run to 4, possibly 450. So really like this for a long. It just needs that volume, So it had a little bit of a spike into the close on Friday, but it needs a little bit of a kick. So there you go. There's ADMP. Next up, TASR. This one's a similar story to FSLR. The person that was asking about this and the people that are upvoting it actually talking about TASR long. So this is a similar story to First Solar, in my opinion. The bounce already happened, right? On FSLR, the bounce was at 35 bucks or 34 bucks, and now it's at 40, right? So it's bounced $6 a share over the last 7 days with no rest. TASR, similar type of move over the last like couple weeks, right? It's gone from 25 bucks up to 29 with very little rest. We had this little gap up here and then, some hesitation, and then it kind of started grinding up. Well, now look at the close on Friday. This thing got really kind of tanked. So to me, this actually looks like a really nice short. I would say, it came right into this resistance up here, and it's starting to sort of reject that. So I would think this probably rolls over, maybe at least back down to 28. I would think probably back down into like half into this range maybe, before it continues. I do think, overall it looks like a decent long, but I mean, look at the size of that bounce. The move's already over. If you're chasing it up here for a long, you're most likely going to be unhappy with the results. So I would expect, this pulls back maybe into the 27s or 28s. It's actually already in the 27s. It looks like it had some after hours news or something. Looks like it had some after hours news. Let's see what's going on there. TASR falls on report it lost the NYPD body camera contract. So that's not good. So this is going to gap down on Monday anyway. So, that might be actually what we need in order to get, it looks like it was closing around 27, which would be down here. So maybe, mid next week, after it starts to kind of settle down after losing that contract, that would be a good potential spot to buy it if you think that it's going to keep going up. Overall, it's in a pretty nice uptrend here for the last year. So I do think as long as it holds that trend, it could potentially come back and bust over 30 bucks and keep going. So it does look pretty good, just not right now. See, it came right into that resistance. So needs to rest a little bit, come back up and test that $29, $30 area a few times, and then go through. Next up, IMNP. Actually liked this one as well. This is kind of a strange pattern, but what I liked about this one was the intraday action on Friday. It's a penny stock, and it's not super liquid, so it's going to be a little bit tricky to trade, but I like the pattern overall. It's kind of like a really long sort of extended wedgie flag thing. So I think it has some potential. But like I said, what I really liked on it was the intraday action on Friday. These big volume pushes midday and also closing on its highs. And then if we look at like a 30-minute chart, it kind of is breaking out of its trend for the last week or so. So I think if that continues, this would be a decent long. You just have to know how to play these things. Where's it going to go? Probably 34, 35 cents, maybe 40 if it gets some real momentum, which is obviously a huge gain. But you've got to be able to understand when the trade is broken. For me, I would definitely trade something like this. This is the type of stock that I actually really like and the type of pattern that I really like. Super cheap, sort of. This one's a little bit less liquid than some of the other ones that I trade. Like BAS was a really nice one this past week. From 50 cents up to almost $1 on about 30 million shares or so. So that's what I prefer. This one's a little bit less liquid. It only does 2 or 3 million shares a day, but when it does get moving, it looks like it could do 10 or 12 million. So it's enough that you can buy 10 or 20,000 shares of it if you want to. You just have to wait for that point where it gets that momentum so that it finally has, you can actually get in and out with enough size to make the trade worth it. So there's IMNP. Next up, QCOM. I like the momentum on the daily. on this chart. I don't know what the story is in terms of the spike midday here, but we're going to figure that out in about 5 seconds. 1:10 p.m. And what day was that? The 29th. September 29th. QCOM in talks to buy NXP Semiconductors. Okay, so this is a NXPI QCOM deal. I didn't actually know what the spike on NXPI was about until I just saw this. So, yeah, I mean, usually the acquiring company will have a lot more momentum than the one being acquired, right? Because the one being acquired, right, if it's NXPI, the one being acquired, if the buying company names a price, they say we're going to buy this thing for $95 a share, then it's just going to go to $95 a share and stick there. If they don't name a price, then the market can sort of find its own price for the deal, and then regardless, the company that's acquiring it, right, investors and traders will see value in the future of the company that is acquiring it much more dynamically than the company that's being acquired, just because there's no price tag put on QCOM just because they acquired NXPI. So I do like this. Definitely has a lot of momentum. I would treat it, I guess, as primarily as a day trader type of stock. Looks like it had support in the 67.50 to 67.75 area. So if you're looking for a place to maybe dip buy it, that might be a good spot, like 67.50 or so. Or the other thing you can do is like in the middle of that range, so it comes down here into like sort of the middle of this consolidation from a couple of days ago. Maybe $67 or $66.80, something like that. So, that'd be a good place to dip buy it. If it holds up over here, then you just use that as your stop loss. So it looks like 68.50 would be a decent stop loss. Maybe under 68 even if you wanted to be a little bit more lenient. But yeah, I mean, overall it looks good. You just got to kind of watch it throughout the day and see how it behaves. Next up, CHK. So this one had a lot of insiders buying it back in the 550s and then at $6, and then it went on a nice run to 8. And so now it's come all the way back down to its longer-term trend line. So this, in my opinion, is actually in a really good spot to buy it for a longer-term trade. On top of that, I believe, is this an oil company or a coal company? Independent Oil and Gas, yeah. So Chesapeake is an oil company, which is what I thought. We've got the OPEC deal, that came out last week, saying that OPEC is going to cut production, and so that's going to increase the price of oil. So, all these oil stocks, BAS was running last week, BCEI, WLL, SDRL, all the little oil stocks were taken off last week. And so you're going to probably see some residual momentum from that on CHK. I don't know anything about the fundamentals of CHK, but I do know, like I said, that there were a lot of insider buys back in the $5.50 to $6 range, and they were not small buys. They were hundreds of thousands of shares. So that was a significant thing to me. It's sitting kind of right on its trend line, right around $6. If it starts to bottom out for a few days, sure, it looks like a good entry point. Just depends on your patience. I mean, if it gets down into the $5 area, then it's probably busted. So, you buy it $6, you set your stop loss at $5.25 or $5, and you hold it for a couple of months and see if it runs to $9. That would be sort of my goal for something like this. So there's CHK. TDG, TransDigm Group. I did not really see anything exciting at all on this chart. It's too thin. You can see the intraday chart's kind of like speckly and spiky. For a stock that's $290 a share, this is going to be really difficult to trade because it's so thin, right? It could spike. What is this candle here? From 288.16 to 288.99, right? So it spiked almost $1. in 5 minutes. And you're going to get a lot of those, spiky up and down moves on a stock like this. So it's definitely in a strong uptrend. I wouldn't trade something like this just because it's too, I guess, restricted. It doesn't really move that much. It's not a momentum stock, and I like to trade momentum stocks. So I don't see anything on this other than the fact that it's in an uptrend. So if you want to buy it and hold it for 2 months, it'll probably work, but I want to make money faster than that. All right, and last one here, Restoration Hardware, RH. I feel like we looked at this one a couple of weeks ago. The name sounded familiar to me, but yeah, it came off of this bounce here, $32 or so. It's not a super powerful momentum type of stock, but it'll probably work. It's just gonna take a few days to run $36 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look super explosive, but it did have a nice, very solid confirmed bounce off of whatever these lows were. If we look at like a 15-minute chart, this sort of like $31.50 to $32 area definitely had a nice strong volume push off of that low. And so now it is, it seems like it's confirmed at this point that it wants to bounce. So I wouldn't be opposed to buying this as a long. It's just going to take a little bit of patience. So there you go. I'm going to actually look at a couple of the other ones that I personally liked. Unfortunately, I don't have time to get through all of these, and a lot of these only had one upvote, right? It's just like a standard point. So if I didn't get to your ticker, then it's most likely, just because it wasn't popular. Sometimes the unpopular ones can be, really good. Sometimes they're unpopular for a reason. So just keep that in mind if I didn't get to your ticker. A couple that I did want to look at were this NTNX. This is an IPO. And I was trading this on Friday, and it really went. This is a super strong IPO, and the reason that I wanted to bring it up is because there were a number of IPOs last week, or within the last couple weeks. ELF was another one that had this, IPO at $17. The thing opened at 24 and then ran to 27. We had NOVN. I don't know specifically what the IPO price was on this. We could probably find out here. I wonder if this was 472. Okay, so they closed their IPO 4.72 million shares at $11 a share. So same type of deal, right? Had the IPO was at 11, it opened at 14.50, ran to 18 or 19 that day. So this has been sort of a theme with these IPOs. And so I think there's a few other ones that are going to be coming out within the next couple of weeks. So I would definitely keep an eye on any of these IPOs, especially if they're like cloud computing or biotech. Those ones have seemed to perform really well, especially on their initial day. The funds that are trading these things, they don't want them to go below the IPO price because then everybody loses money. And so the funds will aggressively defend those spots if they open close to them. So if they open close to the IPO price, then there's a good chance that it takes off and just runs all day. If it opens higher above the IPO price, then it's a little more questionable. But still, I mean, this one, the IPO price I think was like $16 or $17. It opened at 26 and ran to almost 40. So there definitely is potential in these things, to really get moving. And they're great traders if you're day trading. So it's tough to really do any analysis when you've only got one candlestick on the daily, but just from, a trading perspective, these are really, really nice. So that one, and then ZYNE, I wonder what's going on. So Zine is actually running sort of in sympathy with GWPH. So whatever GWPH does, ZYNE is probably going to follow. in its footsteps, right? So GWPH now, this news over here was that they had their third positive clinical trial for whatever their main drug is, Epidiolex or whatever it's called. So it's the second positive phase 3 trial for that particular drug in treatment of one thing, but then they also had a couple of other positive phase 3 results for the same drug for other indications. So, this is now a bunch of different positive phase 3 results that has taken this stock from $35 to $135 since March. And so ZYNE is running in a bit of sympathy on that. You can see back ZYNE on March 14th when the first phase 3 came out for GWPH. GWPH gapped up 100% or so. ZYNE followed right in its footsteps. And so now every time someone sees GWPH take off, ZYNE goes with it. Usually Cara Therapeutics also goes with it. So, when you see GWPH get positive news, I instantly look at Zyne and Cara, and then there's a couple of other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head. But just some food for thought on these ones. So there you go, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. If you find these videos helpful, if you have questions about stuff that I didn't cover, if you want me to, look at some stocks that were not in the video, feel free to just post them in the comments section, and I will see you next week. Peace.